result.
Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, investor, and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you some of the insights from retail's leaders and legends, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Want to drive more traffic and conversions on your e-commerce site? Brands that use video see 41% more traffic from search engines, and that's just the start. Meet Firework, the leader in AI-powered video commerce. Trusted by brands like L'Oreal and Unilever, Firework turns any page into an immersive, shoppable experience, from pre-recorded long-form content to short-form and everything in between. With Firework, you can easily integrate social media videos into your product pages and run pre-recorded digital showrooms with shoppable content. Plus, Firework offers AI-powered virtual assistants to personalize shopper experience and drive higher conversion. That's why I'm an investor and advisor. Learn more at firework.com. Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, and my guest today is Jenny Ming, the Chief Executive Officer of Rothy's Inc., where she leads the fast-growing, sustainable retailer as the business scales via retail, wholesale, and international expansion. Prior to joining Rothy's in January 2024, Ms. Ming held various executive roles at Gap Inc., including founder and president of Old Navy from 1993 through 2006. Jenny then joined specialty retailer Charlotte Russe as president and chief executive officer. In addition to the Rothy's board, Ms. Ming has also served on the boards of Kendra Scott, Poshmark, and Affirm, and currently serves on the boards of Levi Strauss & Co. and Kaiser Foundation Health Plan and Hospitals. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ken. It's nice to see you.
It's good to see you. I don't want to say how far we go back, but I think people can do their own math. We're older. We're often considered veterans or seasoned executives.
I know when they say veteran, I always like, I don't know if I really like that word, but
I think veterans better than seasoned.
Yeah, veterans a little bit better than just being old, okay?
Yes.
But yeah, we go way back, the good old days of the Gap.
We do, and we'll touch on that. But share with us a little bit about your story, because I find it fascinating, and I've learned some things in preparing for this podcast that I didn't know. But you immigrated to the U.S. as a child, and you're born in China, and you came here, you grew up here, and you were preparing to be a home economics teacher. Like, A, what were you thinking? And B, what attracted you to retail?
Well, it is a funny story, but as you said, I immigrated with my entire family, and we had 5 kids, to San Francisco. We lived in Chinatown, and we came to this country for all the same reason every immigrant comes, for better education, better opportunity. And guess what? That's exactly what we got. So I'm very, very thankful to be here, to my adopted country, and I consider myself American. So, I went through school just as very normal. I wanted to be a home economics teacher because it was my favorite course, and I wanted to be a teacher. So I know it's kind of funny to even say home economics because there's no such thing as that now. So my junior year, the California school system decided it wasn't academic enough, and they canceled it. So before I graduate, I lost my job already. So my boyfriend then, who's now my husband, said, Jenny, you'd really like clothes. You should be a buyer. I mean, you have to think where I was 20, 21 years old. This is kind of how you talk. So I said, yes, I do. So he said, you should take some business classes. You could always find a job in business. So I took some marketing class. I took some merchandising class, accounting, which I was horrible at. And I graduated and I interviewed, with those executive programs like every department store had. I was working at Macy's at that time. I got a Macy's and I interviewed with Mervyn's, Bullock's, if you remember Bullock's. I'm really, truly dating myself now. And then the Gap. And the only company that didn't hire me was the Gap. So needless to say, I have a beef with them at that time, right? No. So I started a training program and actually I loved it. At those days when you start training program, you started in the store, remember? You work your way up, train and you become an assistant department manager. Well, I did the same thing at Mervyn's. But I knew I didn't want to go this store route because I really love product. So I got into the buying office. My first job was a distributor allocator, inventory. Then I became like a planner and then, assistant buyer and then a buyer. So all of that come back into, I would say a little less than 5 years, but that was kind of how it is. And then
Kind of like a graduate school.
exactly. But I have to say, every position, what I really appreciate, you really work your ground, up and you kind of understand what everybody did. I actually have a really appreciation for that because nowadays when people graduate, they slip into one position. I actually like the time I spend in the store because end of the day, everything happens there. Today, of course, you have e-commerce, but I like the connection with the customer.
It's funny. I went through the Macy's training program. So
See?
at the same, I think many of us in our era, our generation of retail, we
Hmm.
all went through a department store or a big store experience before we got into specialty or whatever we did after. But like you, I found it so fascinating to go from buying line to store line, back to buying line, understanding and developing a broader appreciation for every job, like in the company. But like you
Exactly.
also, I like the buying. That's kind of, we had all the power as buyers back then.
Well, we thought that was the power, right?
That's
Until I, was at Old Navy in real estate, I realized actually, if I made a mistake, yeah, I could just work myself out of it in the next few months. But if I make a mistake in real estate, I'm stuck with it 5, 10 years. So I realized actually they have a very important job. You realize it takes every function to really, pull together to really have a great brand and a great business. Every function matters. Even though, of course, we were very focused on merchandising because we were merchants, but, in a real good business, a really strong brand, there's really no function that is not important.
Jenny. How did you find your way back to the Gap?
It actually is a funny story because I was reading about Mickey Drexler. I think it was Business Week. There was an article about him, literally talking about his penny loafer, like he has a penny in his loafer. And I was reading about what he was doing at the Gap. And in fact, I actually interviewed at Mervyn's, where actually I was a buyer there. I had really, really great result. I was interviewing for a product development job and I didn't get it. And then in the meantime, literally the next day, I got a phone call from Mickey Drexler, who I just read about doing this where everybody was trying to copy. And he said to me, he's like, I heard you're really a really great buyer. I'm like, who did you hear that from? And first of all, I should back up. He actually called me himself. It wasn't an assistant that you put on hold. You know how he is. He calls you directly. I mean, at that time, that's unusual. You know that.
But it's funny. Nothing's changed.
Exactly. He still calls you directly. In fact, he called me directly last night. So I have to tell you. But anyway, he called me and then I was like, is this a crank call? Because, I just read about him. And he said, no, no, no. One of your denim vendor, his name is Hal Kaufman. I still remember his name. He said, he told me you're the best buyer there is. So are you interested in coming in to talk to me? Are you interested in the Gap? I'm like, yes. I mean, I just read about him Business Week. Why would I turn down this? But you have to realize I have like 3 kids under the age of 2 at that time. You probably don't remember. I have a daughter. 17 months later, I have twins. So when you have 3 kids in a span of less than 2 years, it's not like you're running out to look for a new job. Okay. But, I just thought I'll just go meet him because, it's Mickey Drexler, for God's sake. Right. So I went to meet him actually my twins' first birthday. So I remember the day because I took the day off. I met him. Within 10 minutes of our conversation, I knew I wanted to work for him. And people would say, how do you know that? I said, because he just launched Gap Kids. And I bought a little denim skirt for my daughter and extra, extra small. And it was too big. So I was complaining as a customer. I said, do you know your sizing is too big? It's off. She's a little tiny, but still it doesn't fit. And he picked up
I'm
the phone.
laughing, Jenny. I'm laughing because I can only imagine the fire drill you must have created by telling him that.
So what he did was he picked up the phone and called the assistant merchant. He knew her name, which is great because at Mervyn's, I don't even think the president knew my name, right? So he called Kelly. Yeah, bring it up. So she brings up, she said, oh, they found out actually the sizing is too big. Here, bring her home, try on your daughter. Let me know how she fits. I was so impressed. He listened to a customer, reacting, not defensive. Really, I mean, I want to work for somebody like that. I want to be like that. So within that 10 minutes, I was thinking, like, how do I go home and convince my husband that I should get a new job? That also travel, as you know, we travel quite a bit and with three little kids. But you know what? I was just so determined to work for him. It's probably one of my best decisions I ever made in my career.
Then
So,
you came to the Gap and you reported into Ms. DeRosa, Patty DeRosa.
yes, I did. Well, I was the second merchant that they brought in. Okay. And I reported to Patty DeRosa, which you also know. And she was also terrific too. And so, first, of course, he asked me, which I also really love. He asked me, Jenny, what would you be interested in buying? Which, so of course I did women all my life. So I was like, oh, how about kids? Because I have three kids, I could really relate to it. And I'm excited, it's a new business. He said, well, somebody else is in that seat. What else are you interested in? I'm like, how about men? He started laughing. He said, nobody wants to do men's, especially after women, because it's so slow and boring, right? And I said, no, I want to do men's because I've never done it before. I'm always willing to try something new. So anyway, so he said, okay, how about active? And he said, it's a very small department. There's only 4 items, as you know, acrylic polyester fleece top and bottom, the running short and the pocket tee. He said, but we'll give you one more item because it's a little too small. We'll give you the interlock turtleneck. So that's with my 5th item. So I'm like, what could I be doing all day with only 5 items? But, that's an opportunity, as you can imagine. So I started in men's active. The first thing I did was, even though it's men's active, I look at it as a unisex active. So I added extra small in the pocket tee, added pink, yellow, mint, and all of a sudden, women were buying it. So you know what I mean. It's like, it's all in how you look at opportunity, as you and I both know.
Well, the active department quickly became one of the biggest businesses in Gap. I
Yeah.
was running denim while you were running Gap. So the two of us had our hands in a lot of volume, but for sure, between the Gap arch and the hoodies, I mean, you were
No, he didn't
an
let me
afternoon.
do the Gap
Oh,
art.
that's right. That's right. He never liked, Mickey didn't like
He
the
did
Gap.
not like Gap. Yeah. And I keep wanting to do it. And he say, no, you can't do it. Because what's great about Gap is because there's no logo plaster all over. So when I did Old Navy, of course, I was able to do that. I was so happy.
See, Jenny, you were at Gap for how many years before
7 years.
7? But and
I
then Mickey tapped you.
Yes.
How did you feel? Tell us a little bit about the moment that Mickey said, Jenny, I've got something new for you.
Well, actually, I went up to see him because my husband got a new job in Hong Kong. And so I went up to tell him that actually I will be moving back to Hong Kong in summer. But you and I both know we have a really large Hong Kong office. Even though I love merchandising, but I love sourcing too. So I'm like, I'm sure you're going to be able to find me a job in our Hong Kong office. And he looked at me, he said, yesterday the board just approved that we're going to start a new business. We have Gap here and we have Banana. We don't play in the mass value sector. And we really thought that you would be great because you have the opening price point at the Gap. I'm like, oh, you're just saying it because you want me to stay. He said, no, really. It's really real. And I said, how about if I don't do it? He said, well, we'll probably have to shelf it for a while and think about it. So literally, this is the conversation. I'm like, oh, wow. Of course, I want to do it because how often do you get to start a new business and back up by the Gap and with Mickey, right? So I went home and told my husband, which he already quit his job. So it's about February. Then he was going to move back. And then I was going to bring all the kids back in June when they're out of school. And then we were debating. So of course, I'm pretty strategic, as you know. So I said to my husband instead, like, well, this great job and your job is not as great as mine. Can't go there because it doesn't work. So I said, where do you think it's best to bring up our children? Is it Hong Kong or is it the Bay Area? So I went the kids route and he agreed in the end of the day, the US would be better served to bring up our children. So we decided I could get to do this new thing. So I said to him, I said, well, since you quit your job, why don't you, fix our house? Because we've been trying to remodel our house for 4 years, never happened. Get our financials together because, when you have two busy, husband and wife at that time, both traveling with 3 young kids, there's a lot of things you don't do or you can't do. So he was able to take a year off and really help get us into a new house, remodel this and do that. So really made a difference. So I could really focus on starting Old Navy.
And what year was this, Jenny, roughly? Just so
1993.
93. So when you started Old Navy, it was called Gap Warehouse. You didn't
Yes.
really have a name. and
Yeah.
some super funny stories about
Yes.
landing on a name. What do you recall the stories being on how
Well,
the name happened?
yes. So we did Gap houses because we know that we could use that name, right? And it was a test. Just like anything, you have to have a proof of concept. So one thing I did do that, of course, looking back was a really smart thing was I told him I wanted 50 store. And he looked at me like, well, I could give you one store. I could give you 49 of the bottom Gap store, outlet, whatever. And I go, okay, because you have to buy 100 dozen to be minimum. That's how I decided 50 times 2 dozen. Okay, I need a 50 store. So he pulled those 50 stores out. And as you know, they lost money. But of course, when you have thousands of stores, they didn't know that. Then he said to me, if you could break even, I would be happy. But I told the team, I said, if we don't make money, we're not going to roll out. So we have to make money. So, and then we started in February, we got product in.
But Jenny, let me ask you before you go there, because you mentioned the team. Now, how did you go about recruiting for this yet to be named, who knows if it'll be successful idea?
So first of all, there's 11 of us. And he kind of actually, I didn't recruit at that time. Well, I did a little bit, but more Mickey. Mickey just, who could we spare? Exactly. And, two people from merchandising, one person, literally like whoever we could spare. It's not like, looking back, people always say, you take your best people and put it in that new position. It wasn't. In fact, I remember asking, I said, I'm a little nervous. You put me here when it's not all these people we could spare. So I was spareable. Mickey, you could always have a candid conversation with him. So we started with 11 people and we kind of divided the job. So I had the buying, the merchandise planning, the visual, and the allocation, the business planning part. And we had a head of marketing, which is Richard Chrisman. We have head of store, Kevin Lonigan. And then we have a head of design. At that time, it wasn't Jeff Feifel yet. It was somebody else. So there was 4 of us, like a team, as you know. So it really worked out well, to be honest, because we all brought what we are best at. The great thing was, although, we all reported into Mickey, but we worked very well together. We were very aligned with the vision and we really trusted each other to what each other do. So I never had to check with it. Kevin, are you doing your job here? What are you doing in the store? And he would never need to worry about, the product and pricing and all of that. So I think there was a lot of trust. And, as you can imagine, we were at the underdog. We had the big brand like the Gap and Banana. And you probably remember at that time, first of all, a lot of people thought I was crazy to do this because they say, well, you got, Gap and you have one of the best division, which is active. Why would you do something like this? I'm like, I never thought it was a risk. Actually, I thought it was an incredible opportunity. When do you ever get a chance to start something, and back up by the Gap and especially with Mickey leading it, right? So I looked at it as an opportunity. So actually in the first few years, we were able to prove ourselves really literally overnight. August, we got product in the store. By September, October, we knew we had a winner, which is, Ken, you've seen it all. That doesn't happen. We're like, I had to pinch myself every time. Like, is this really true? Literally, we knew there was something really real here. As you could imagine, it's really about affordable, great clothes that people are proud to wear because we're smarter. You don't always have to spend tons of money to look great. And we also want people to be proud that they're smart, that they don't have to spend money because it really is about fashion for the family with great value under the great umbrella of fun. And we didn't take ourselves seriously because clothing is not that serious. I think that was a little bit different than the Gap and Banana because we took clothes much more seriously in those 2 brands. So we, when Gap did chino, we did the cargo pant, we did all these crazy things, but you know what? It worked for the brand because we did take ourselves seriously.
I remember we mentioned earlier, but the challenge with naming the brand, and there was an
Yes.
outside firm that came in to
So
come up
let's
with all
talk about that.
the craziest names. I don't know if do you remember some of the
Yes, I
names?
remember all of it.
Okay, what were the names that Old
So
Navy
what
could have
we
been?
hire a naming firm and because, they hired that for naming cars and other stuff. So they interview us and we describe what the brand is. So they came in. I remember being in the boardroom. We all sitting there and they said, we came up with 3 names. I'm like, oh, great. So the first name, it was Fortlift. And I thought he was joking because I'm like, Fort Lift? Like, who shops at Fort Lift? We did say industrial feeling, but we didn't like Fort Lift didn't.
Yeah, forklift is. Yeah,
So I said, that's okay because, there's two more. I only need one name. I don't need three. And the next thing he said, elevator. I'm like, elevator? That's even, I don't know. Elevator is worse than Fort Lift or
right.
Fort Lift. It's so bad, right?
Hopefully the third one, they were setting you up for a good third choice.
Exactly. And I said, oh, I only need one. And he said, this is the best. It really describes your brand, has nostalgia, it's forward thinking. I'm like, great. Monorail. And I'm like, monorail? Like the monorail in Disneyland? Monorail? So I'm like, oh my God, these all three names are not names I would ever think of being a brand or a store. So of course I already jumped, like, how could I don't pay him? I didn't even go to like what else. I'm like, we can't pay this person because he's so bad.
Right. Those
So
names are markdowns. You got to get rid of all of them.
So, needless to say, we didn't take any of those names. And, the label goes in the first thing. And people were getting confused about Gap Warehouse. Is it Gap, cheaper Gap? So, we knew we need a brand and we need a name. So, we were really desperate. You could have said ABC. I would have like, good name. And all of a sudden, Mickey jumps out and say, how about Old Navy? I'm like, where did that come from? And he said, well, it's always been back of my mind that it's a great denim name. He said, actually, it's a bar, a pub in Saint Germain, Paris. And he was describing it to me. I'm like, to be honest, the first time I heard it, I'm like, oh, Navy, I don't know. But what I
were
did
thinking like maybe forklift is a good one. No.
So, but Maggie, if you remember, and Richard Chrisman took the name and they put it, romanticize it, really put in the right logo in a mug, T-shirt and baseball cap. It really came to life. What I love about the name, I feel like there's a sense of history, a sense of mystery. It didn't sound, budget. And no offense to Target and Walmart of the world. But, at that time, nobody really wanted to wear like Walmart on their chest or even at Target at that time. Okay. Well, Old Navy, as you could remember, how many logos we use and millions, if not billions. So we loved the name. So that actually Mickey came up with. I said, Mickey, you could have put me out of my misery much earlier. Why did you not say that earlier?
I thought the story was that he had the name and maybe he shared it with Bob or the board and they said, no, we need to have a naming convention. And then they brought in this group who came up with terrible names that Mickey hated and you guys decided.
Maybe that's in the inside scoop, but
maybe
I think he went through is what expected of him. But Mickey always have his own ideas, that. But he literally just blurred out Old Navy for the first time when I was really desperate. And I'm like, it sounds good to me.
So it was funny as you were, then you opened up that store on 17th and 6th.
18th, yes.
Or 18th and 6th in Manhattan. And like overnight, I think that store single-handedly launched the brand. Like it went, everyone knew it.
Yeah. I think it's like, if you go back and look at history, probably like, oh, we should have waited a few more years. But somehow, I think between Mickey and Don Fisher, because Don Fisher, suggests that flagship. And everybody like, are we really ready for that? It's like, and we have to, all of a sudden, our 6,000 square foot, we now have a 18,000 square foot store. We're going to be able to, but we have such a great team of people. If you remember, also super creative. And the whole store environment, it was done in-house. We didn't bring anybody in. We had all that talent inside the company. And it really did, as you said, launch the brand. And really, I think we won a lot of accolades and awards that year or two because the brand, we hit $1 billion less than 4 years, which is, I don't think that record has ever been broken. And we were as you remember also, the growth vehicle of Gap Inc. We were opening like 50 stores. And there was one year I remember when Mickey said, can you open 200 stores? Because we need $1 billion. I'm like, 200 stores? Are you crazy? We did. Okay. Because you know how Kevin Lonigan is. He's like, I will find it for you. So we were opening 50, 100, 200 store a year. So it was very fast growing, needless to say.
While you were doing that, then I got tapped for a job that was a grade below where Old Navy was. They wanted me to run Gap Outlet. Now, I wasn't maybe as excited as you are because I was like, wait, are you doing this so all the people in Old Navy feel better about their job? Like, oh, At least you're not in the outlet division. Jenny, I couldn't get a return phone call when I would call. Would you want to come work for me in the outlet? Hang up, hang up, hang up. I couldn't get anybody to come
You
work for me.
in the beginning, same here. I couldn't get people to work at Old Navy or, in fact, you remember people call old slavery is because we work like, 12, 14, 16 hours, but that's a startup.
It is. And, we're both so fortunate because for me, that was probably my favorite job at Gap. I got the stores you rejected. So I got the worst of the worst. I think they gave those.
Somehow you made it work.
Yeah. But, it was a new area where you became the expert. And I call it my entrepreneurial period. We were intrapreneurs because we got to be entrepreneurs inside of a company and build
Exactly.
something with, like, you could be a startup, but you had money behind you.
Yeah.
You had the Bank of Gap behind you.
Absolutely. But, also I told my team, I said, think of us as a standalone so that we will, I remember negotiating with the DC because they were charging me the same price they were charging Banana Republic. I'm like, their stuff is like $50. My stuff is $5. How can you charge me, processing fee the same way? I said, no. So I started negotiating with them. And then once I got a lower price, Banana, like, why is Navy so cheap? I want to renegotiate. I think sometimes when you have new things, new thinking, it really, innovation or a new idea, it helps the entire company to think differently. Don't you agree with that?
Yes, you look at different ways to open stores, different ways to construct deals, different jobs, responsibilities, different ways to bonus teams. I mean, you really start thinking of it as like, now I'm responsible for everything
Exactly.
versus one thing.
Yeah.
And that was what was so fun.
It is because it's really like your own business. But I always treated, being even a merchant as even when I was just buying active is my own business because that's what makes it so fun, right? In fact, I tell all my merchants this. I say, pretend you're an investment banker. I'm giving you $1 million and you have to give me back $3 million. How are you going to look for opportunity, pricing strategy, new product? It is investment. So same thing, they invest in us. And what is our return to the company, right?
I think you took Old Navy to close just over $6 billion before you left Gap
Well,
Inc.
the physical store piece was about 6.7 billion when I left, but it doesn't count the e-commerce piece. So the brand itself, if you add the e-commerce piece, would probably have been close to 8 billion and does not count the outlet piece. So, which after I left, or maybe you left too,
Yeah.
they combine all of that together as more of a brand versus more of the channel, right? So, yeah.
So then you took a few years off. You said you
Yes.
weren't done with the retail bug just yet.
Well,
And you decide to go back in and do more after such, you were in the end zone, you spiked the ball, you did it all, but yet you weren't done.
Well, because as you know, at that time was the president, because there's so many other functions that didn't report to us. They reported into Inc., right? So I was getting a lot of phone calls, for CEO jobs. And I was like, I'm not sure I want to be a CEO. I said, let me take some time off. I've been at that time worked at Gap Inc. for 20 years. And my kids, as you remember, I just told you, just finished college. In fact, when I wrote the last check for my daughter at USC, I decided to leave the company because it was like, my kids are grown. I've worked in this great company for 20 years. I'm more than I ever expected for my career. Maybe I take some time off and decide what I want to do. So I did a lot of nonprofit, but I also got a lot of board calls, which I never thought about at that time because, wasn't sure exactly what that is. But I got about 6 inbound calls. Maybe I could take a board seat and, kind of take it easy, travel for pleasure versus travel for work, all of that. So I did that for 2 years. I met a lot of people. I also made a list of people that that call me all these years or people that I've never met that, I now have time because I'm not attached to any company, right? And so I had a really great time. And then I met a lot of private equity. So I went actually with Advent International. They bought me Charlotte Russe to run. You know how I decided to become a CEO and like she said, come back into the business. I want to not ever regret that I didn't do something. And, so fortunate that someone want me to run a company. And I don't want to as I age and say, gosh, I wish I did that. Or, I should have been a CEO. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. If it's successful, great. If it's not, I would have learned so much and I would have no regrets in my life.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Looking for a 3PL that's truly next level? Cart.com is a 3PL on steroids with nationwide distribution centers and the most advanced AI-driven software solutions from WMS and OMS to TMS, all designed to streamline your entire delivery process. With Cart.com, you get a fully integrated commerce platform that unifies your operations, data, and customer experience all in one place. Their platform combines physical distribution with cutting-edge AI, empowering retailers to scale faster and more efficiently. Whether you're D2C, B2B, or omnichannel, Cart.com connects your tech stack, simplifies your logistics, and powers your growth from click to customer, enabling distribution for Janie and Jack, Portland Leather Goods, Tom's, and many more. Cart.com. What were the biggest challenges that were just in the end unsurmountable? What were you up against there that even you couldn't fix?
Well, first of all, I think first of all, it's a fast fashion. So, I think fast fashion has such a bad name. How I looked at fast fashion was not because it's throwaway clothes. I looked at it as really a shortened supply chain. As you know, closer you come in buying something, you're more right? Because you know what's fashion. And you also buy less because you don't have to guess. So literally, we could buy things from 4 to 6 weeks, as long as the longest is about 10 to 12 weeks, which is a dream because we don't talk months, we talk weeks. So we turn 10 times a year.
Wow. And
There's a lot of positive.
Just to put that in context, like typically companies would turn 4, maybe 5 times a year.
Yes,
So this
4
is
times is pretty
fast.
common.
That's
5
right.
is they're doing great.
Right. 10 is
So,
like,
exactly. So it's a different model of business. And I was very fascinated by the fast turn. And, I always really liked the value piece also is because not everybody could afford these hundreds of dollars of, beautiful gowns and dresses and all that. So I think, I'm women, for all. So we had great business for consecutive quarters, positive comp, and our EBITDA keep rising. So we were about to go public and talking to bankers, everything. And then the bottom fell out, which is really strange. But one thing is because our customer are young adult or teenagers and young adult. So things happen faster. All of a sudden, she used to go through the mall at least once a month. And now all of a sudden she's not coming in with it. Why? Because she was perusing through all the fashion with her phone. We actually believe in digital, but at our price point, digital is very expensive because of shipping, because there's always a threshold. So by going public, we will have enough money to invest in the business. And we didn't move fast enough, to be honest with you. So if I could go back and people would say, what would you do different? There are quite a few things I would do different. I would have went faster and pivot to digital faster and how to balance between the two. As you and I both know, you want to be wherever your customers want you to be. If it's in stores, you want to be there. If it's online, you want to be there. You can't just be one of the other.
and
Right.
I know you kept that thought or you took that mentality forward, and we'll touch on that in a minute, but so you wind down at Charlotte.
So went down and I thought, you know what? I actually, in between that time, I actually did quite a lot of board work. I joined the Kaiser board. After that, I joined the Levi's board. I was on the Barney's board at one time. So I'm like, and I really enjoy that. So I did that. And then I also was a executive coach and mentor. I mean, we all do that as a part of our job, but I never thought about doing it professionally. So I got a call and they say, I know this is what you love to do. Would you consider doing it? So I joined Exco Leadership, which is most of us were CEOs. So it's more of operating mentor coaching, which I find it to be really great. So I did that and I was able to work in company like from McDonald's to Intel, Pfizer, IBM. So very much more, nothing to do with retail, but good leadership is good leadership. Right. So I did that plus boards. So I was pretty content and happy. So of course, one of the board was Rothy's. And Rothy being in San Francisco, so some of our people from Charlotte Russe actually went to Rothy. And so when we sold 49.9% to Alpha Goddess, they had 4 board seats. The Rothy's team have 4 board seats. They have 1 independent. So they call me and say, Jenny, would you be interested? I love the brand and I love, what it stands for. And on top of it is in San Francisco, which makes it even easier. And then on top of it, I knew a lot of people here. So I said, yes. So of course, as soon as I joined the board and they're like, would you consider being a CEO? I said, no, of course not. I'm done with that. I said, I'm really happy being on the board because at that time I was also on the board of Kendra Scott, just finished with a Poshmark because we sold to Naver and then also a firm. So I'm like, I have plenty to keep me busy. And I also just started a new program with Hyundai out of Korea, a women leadership development program. So my plate is full. But so they said, they finally convinced me to just come in for a few months to help them with strategy, operating better, working better together. So I did that for a few months. The next thing, like, you have to come in. So next thing you know, I said yes. Okay.
Shocker.
So true.
So how you said yes, and now you're really going to take on the reins, replacing the founders.
Yes.
I mean, what was that dynamic like?
Well, as you know, I've been in many brands with founders. I mean, Gap is one of them. Levi's is one of them. Kendra Scott is one of them. Poshmark is one of the firms. So I actually am very used to having founders around. And I have to say, Stephen and Roth, the two founder, one is a art gallery owner and one is a investment banker. So what's great about them, first of all, I have incredible respect for what they created. Like seriously, if someone asked me to do this, I wouldn't even do half as good as what they did. So sometimes I think when you don't know everything is when you could see all the possibility. Sometimes when you know too much, there's all the reasons why it can't happen. Right. So they were really ready.
Great point. I mean, it really is. I mean,
Think
by
about
knowing
it.
too much,
You know too much. You're like, no, this won't work because I tried it before. And I think that's why most founder actually are, because they could dream and they don't have to think about all the hurdles and all the roadblocks. There's something good about that. So they were really ready to step off because the business needs new leadership, new thinking, just like every business. I knew exactly the time I was ready to leave Old Navy. There's always time because somebody else comes in with new, fresh look. I find when I keep doing the same thing over, I'm like, I'm not getting any fresh ideas.
Yeah.
This is time and it's okay. It's actually normal. In fact, you want to work yourself out of a job. So Stephen and Roth is super, super supportive. They wanted me to be on the seat because I think the good thing was I was on the board first. So I got to know them. It was not like they went out to interview me for the CEO job. And I also was on the board for over, a year and a half before I stepped in. So I knew a little bit more than, most jobs that you would have to step in as a CEO. So it was a very easy transition. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I want to go on to what your first priorities were when you took the job, but just so everybody is very familiar with the sustainability quotient, that's very much a part of Rothy's. Maybe you can expand on that.
Okay. So what Roth worked on is plastic water bottle recycled into filaments, into threads that we actually knit into shoes. And it's all knitted and it's all recyclable. But not only it is sustainable, but as you and I both know, if it's not great style or cute, doesn't matter if it's sustainable, right? So it has to be stylish, comfortable. One of our goals is there's no break-in period. You wear it immediately, it fits and it's comfortable. The last piece, which I actually think is the most important piece, which a lot of people don't know, is washable. So because it's plastic water bottle. So after you go on a trip, after you walk hundreds of miles, you could put it in your washing machine and wash it and just take it out and dry it. It's all nice and clean. I mean, to me, that is a game changer for me. So and the great thing is it packs really easy because it's knit. So when I come back from a trip, I throw 6 pairs of my shoes in the washing machine, wash it, take it out. It's all nice and clean already. So I think that's unbelievable. So when I came in, I said to the team, just like any business, it plateaued.
Jenny, we just set a little bit of context. This is 2022. You joined the board.
And this is 2023 now.
And
they plateau. And I was on the board. They asked me to come in to help. So I said I could, come in 2 or 3 days a week, work with the team. So, but even then I brought the team together. I say, okay, let's really focus on a few things. number one for me in turnaround business is you need sales momentum. Retail is about momentum. So we have to gain sales momentum, but we have to do it profitably, not at all costs. You could grow top line with no no profit. I'm not interested in that.
We've
So I
seen
said
that movie.
those are the two things. And then I said, let's bring all the stuff that's selling. What is not selling? Can we push it? Because we own our own factory. Let's really be nimble. So literally, I came in for the summer and I told them I was only stay through Thanksgiving because I have another, something else I need to work on. But in those short few months, we saw literally a turn in the business. We had fourth quarter, we relooked at the fourth quarter, how to get momentum, and we start positive comping and we became profitable the next quarter.
And this
This
was
is,
at
I
that
mean,
moment.
the reason why, in retail, the business is so fun is because it's very reactive. You could do something versus like people sitting around waiting, waiting, waiting. There's always something to do. And really also reset a mindset of a growth mindset, which is really trying new things, not be afraid, test and learn. I'm really big on testing something and learning from it. If it worked, great, we buy more. If it didn't, move on, let's go. So really a test and learn mentality and a growth mindset was really what I was really trying to instill in the team.
And
And the
Jenny,
great thing is we're really small. We're a very small company. So, there's not a lot of layers and everybody was really excited, to do this together. So we're able to make it happen very, very quickly.
and at this point, it was still a very focused D2C. It was a D2C business.
Yeah.
This was online and some stores, but no wholesale,
Yeah.
no international yet.
So when we then started 2024, because I promised them I work on the strategy for the next year. Once we got starting to see momentum and we see some profitability, we're like, okay, where do we go from here? So my thing has always been, you want to be wherever your customer want you to be. And today is more than just store and online. I think we have 13, 14 store, still very small. But I really realize that wholesale in the right place actually gets you more customer. Amazon, I know everybody like, you shouldn't be on Amazon. I'm like, it's the biggest search engine. If you type in Rothy at that time, our competitor would show up. Would you think that is acceptable? No. So I said, we have to be on Amazon. I said, I know the profit margin might not be the same, but this is not about that. As long as we don't lose money. But for me, it was getting more eyeballs on our brand and also getting more customer to know us. So only way you could do that is really getting out there and look at every channel possible, right? And you can't open store fast enough and you can't afford to keep, feeding online. So there have to be other alternatives.
You've added,
So diversifying the channel was one of them. And then really have a growth mindset and really set some high bar on how we're going to grow. So all of that was, in our plan. But more importantly, what is important for us is also making sure that we grow with a brand-led growth mindset. What I mean by that is not just top-line growth for the sake of growth, but really the brand means something. So when we started with Nordstrom, we were able to tell a brand story. If you went in, you would see it's about sustainable story because we don't want to just be more, another shoe on a shelf because there's plenty of that. If we can't tell a brand story, then you miss the whole point of Rothy's.
So you added Nordstrom's, you have Bloomingdale's, and you now have Anthropology.
Yes.
So you really, and Amazon, you have like the best
Well,
wholesale partners out there.
well, we thought those were really different partners too.
Yes.
And then, of course, we then also did a pop-up in Liberty. And then we were invited now permanent on the floor. And then also did a pop-up with Le Bon Marché just this spring and also did extremely well. Also invited now have a permanent space in the main shoe floor. So we're doing a lot of those kind of partnership. I like the idea of pop-up. So you get, some attention versus just selling wholesale and then you're on the shelf. So we find that to really work well. So we're focusing domestically and also Europe. And then, of course, everybody asks, how about Asia? Of course, we want to do Asia, but, we also want to do it right and do it well. So let's do it one step at a time. So there's plenty of growth left in the US. We're just dipping our toe in Europe.
You took on the brand when you were doing just under 200 million. And these are publicly available numbers that I've found, so nothing out of school here.
Yep.
Give us a sense of what all of this has meant, adding your wholesale partners, some international
Yeah.
expansion, and the Jenny factor, getting in there as a merchant. And Jenny, between the clog, and then you also have your Mary Jane story. I mean, all of these things in less than 2 years, how much has it added to the business?
Well, I could tell you is nice double digit top line and also, EBITDA of double digit.
Well,
And
congratulations.
and that's one thing I learned, my gap days, again from Mickey is what are you going to be famous for? What are you standing for? If you went into a restaurant, what would you order? So we actually had two really iconic, the point and the flat, which is great. But if you bought it already, what else are you going to buy? And we need new customers to buy our known flats. But the thing is, as you know, women, we love our shoes. We want more than just two shoes in our closet. So this is when, we have an incredible design merchant team. So they came up, I mean, the cloth was in our assortment, but what I think is really important is it's not, how could we make it ours? What we mean by Rothy, a little bit more feminine, something that is a little bit more refined looking. So it's a merino wool blend without plastic. So if you touched it, it actually feels really a little softer. So I am very focused on sustainable materials that we can use. So we use hemp. We're looking at, have a lot of boucle coming. So it's just like, you would never even know that it's sustainable because it looks so good.
When I walked into your store, I think I went to your store on Columbus Avenue because I had to go and check it out. But I
Uh-huh.
walked in and I looked to my left, and there's like the point of view clogs on the wall, different colors, the Mary Jane on the wall, different colors. I said, it's right out of Jenny's playbook.
It's totally me, but I have to say, my CMO also came from Gap Inc. and Old Navy. So, I think we all know, you have to stand first. Is you walk around like, what should I buy? Versus like, no, you need to buy this. Exactly. So, no, it's very much so.
With so much tailwinds, you've had great tailwinds, you've had some strong success, and now a little bit of a headwind with this new thing called tariff. I mean, you got through COVID and now you have tariffs. And the fact that you own your own factory in China and the business has been pretty much 100% sourced out of China, what do you do now?
So when I diversify our channel, I was also diversifying our supply chain. You and I both know in my Gap days, we did a lot of production. And one thing I always learned, you never put all your eggs in one basket. You would never be in one factory in one country. So when I stepped in, I'm like, we need to diversify our sourcing. Doesn't mean we need to be 60 country, but certainly let's look at two or three. So we've been doing it for a while. Of course, China will always be important to us, especially our technical ability. So we will be shipping out of, from Vietnam to Indonesia. We're looking at Brazil. So we will be diversified.
You
So that is
mentioned,
something that was planned before the tariff. But now we're moving even faster because we can't move fast enough. So that's happening.
do you foresee price increases hitting the stores for the fall?
That's not my goal. But, one thing I learned is never say never because you never know. But our plan right now, our goal right now is not to raise prices. So we have to, we've been renegotiating with our supplier. We've been getting some optimization from our own factory. Like what is nice to have? What is not, we don't need. Looking at inventory, can we turn faster? There's lots of leverage you need to do. It's not just like, oh, okay, I could take the easy way out. Okay, this is 139, now it's 169. No, can't because especially you hear, the consumer sentiment is an all-time low. So, oh yeah, let's go raise prices on shoes.
Right.
It's not like I'm selling eggs and, bread or cereal that you have to have. Besides shoes is not the most important thing on your list. So we're going to try to, sit tight and do everything possible. We're kind of reading day by day. We have long-term plans, but also have a lot of short-term. We look at the business every week, every month, how the drill is, and we'll be reactive. We'll probably be less promotional for fourth quarter, which is always, I think a lot of people will be a little bit more careful, right?
It'll be an interesting time. I think there'll be some challenges around amount of inventory available. Some companies may be forced to raise prices to stay in business. Other
I know.
companies, if this isn't resolved soon, will be out of business. And it's really hitting the smaller companies that really leverage China for its smaller MOQs, faster turn. It's been
All the
60.
reasons why you're there,
That's
right?
right. And they've had a long time to perfect this.
Yes. And for us, the same. But like I said, it just so happened we started it a little earlier, not because of Tatera, because it was the right thing to do. And now, of course, really, it makes even more sense. And, I always tell even my own factory, you could learn from other OEMs, right? And you could also benchmark, so you can't just only know what you know and think it's the best. Because if you don't look at other people, how do you compare and contrast, right? So we're working very diligently, but in the meantime, this tariff is causing a lot of issues, problem across the board. And I think there's more to, what inventory we have now. I'm talking about myself and all the other brands out there or other category, is still some of the old pricing. It really does not hit until a little starting now, right?
Right.
So I think there's going to be a lot more to come.
Hopefully this will be resolved, at least in a provisional way, where they'll bring the embargo, they'll eliminate what is really an embargo and get it down to something that we can at least manage. I don't know if it goes to 50%, but that's better than 145. It's one
Yeah,
thing.
anything is better than
Right.
145.
It's one thing to not make money. It's another thing to lose money.
Exactly. You
That's
can't
very
do that.
important.
Well, it's almost like you bring inventory in so you could lose money. That doesn't work. How
No,
long can you run a business like that? So I just think that, I just hope it will be resolved sooner rather than later
we all do.
because everybody is like
It's really
waiting.
craziness. It's crazy. Jenny, as you look out next year to 2 years and you think about the growth of the company, certain product categories are going to grow and then certain channels will grow. Where do you see the accelerants in product and in channel to
Yeah.
these growth?
So I think in category, for sure, we are in men's and we kind of put it aside a little bit when we focus on turning around the women's business because women tend to buy more shoes than men, as you can imagine. But we really believe in the men's business too. So
You've got a very cool sneaker in there. It's kind of a cross between the Veha and the Stan Smith.
it's like we call it court sneakers. I know
Oh,
exactly what you're saying.
okay. That's the
The
one.
clog, we got the clog for men too, and it's been a
Oh,
bestseller for us too. So we added kids and, the Mary Jane, as you mentioned. And how could a little girl not have a Mary Jane? Of course, they would have to have a Mary Jane. So we launched that, and that's been terrific.
and the fact that they're washable. What parent doesn't love the fact that their
Exactly.
kids' shoes are washable?
None. So that's why actually, I have grandkids now, and my granddaughter only wears Rothy's, okay,
Oh,
because you could throw in a washing machine. And so we would love to, and of course, accessory. We always had an accessory business, but we think we could even do more. The travel business, I think those is certainly, things that we're looking at. So those are the categories. So we have plenty that we could still grow. As for channel, you said it, we are with some wholesale and we would love to roll out more stores with Nordstrom. We're in 20 doors and actually it's doing well. So we will see. And we want to make sure that, we're also growing our own store. We're opening 10 stores this year.
how many
Um,
stores do you have now?
we have, I think, 27. We're opening our next two stores, Ala Moana and Greenwich. So,
Very cool.
yeah. So we probably could open about 10 store a year. And I think we'll probably be under 100. We don't need to be more than that because of the wholesale piece. We don't have a problem being in the same mall or same center as Nordstrom because, there is a loyalty to Nordstrom. Great. If you want to shop there, we feel great. Terrific. But if not, we have our own customer experience in our own store, which we love. If you went to Fifth Avenue store, you would have seen our new prototyping versus our Upper West Side. And so, for me, the consumer experience is very important. Doesn't matter if you were shopping online or if you shop at a store or if you shop out in our wholesale, our partner, we want you to feel our brand cohesively.
To that point, how is technology being used today, or what are you excited about relative to technology and moving the business forward? What's got your attention?
Well, first of all, technology is even more important today. It's always been important, but it's more a quiet important. Like you can't turn on a business without technology, period. Okay. So I would say the first thing for us in technology would be the consumer experience seamless as possible, the personalization that you feel like you know me. So those are kind of like your basics that we're still working through and working on. And then the other piece is really, as you could imagine, being international is another host of technology. But I think that what is coming up is a lot of the AI piece that is really going to really make a huge difference. So in fact, I was just talking to somebody about AI, your pay media, how people search is different. I mean, I could go on and on. It's
It is.
endless.
It is changing the way we shop, the way we buy, the way we interact in stores, plan our businesses. AI is weaving. I mean, you can't even have tariffs without AI. You need an A and an I in the word tariff. I mean, it's everywhere. It's
It
everywhere.
is. So, I mean, retail has evolved tremendously. I mean, even for me to talk about, diversifying your channel. I mean, when you and I were at Gap, it's about controlling your channel. Today it's not about controlling. There's no such thing as controlling. The customer is the one who's making the decision.
I think
So you want it, right?
it's so smart what
Always
you're
change.
doing. I mean, you and I both know you can get the product out to the customer where the customer is far more quickly, doing it through existing real estate than building your own stores, and also
Exactly.
learn more about your customer and their likes in all those areas without losing so much inventory.
Exactly. So for me is how can I get to connect with my customer faster, easiest? And then also how can I get more customer to connect to customer? Sometimes it's not through your own. That's why you need partners to do that, right?
That's interesting, Jenny. You mentioned partners. And before we conclude, really want to ask you about collaborations or partners or co branded campaigns. Where is your head when it comes to that?
I think if it's the right partner, like what I mean by right is have the same purpose value, same like customer sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It has to,
the
then
DNA.
people, yes, it makes sense. We just starting conversation with few. It's because this is another way of connecting to other new customer or customer that makes it even much more robust and much more almost doubling down. So I'm a huge believer in that. But I am a believer in that, but I also don't want to go crazy like, oh, every week is something, then you lose sight of who you are. That's not what I'm talking about. But I definitely think that if you choose it correctly, you really enhance your brand.
Well, it's
Um,
the same way that you went around choosing your wholesale partner. Who would be the
exactly.
right brand? I mean, you and I both know just from our time with apparel companies, we tend to not do shoes that well, although we
No, that's
try.
why.
There are shoe companies and then there are apparel companies.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm looking at. Like, how could we help other apparel company to do shoes, that makes sense for them? So we have the expertise, right? But then it finishes an outfit.
It does. It's funny. Who I think about, and maybe it's a connection. We can talk about it later. But, Faraday is very much there's a DNA there in terms of an approach and a view to recycling and
Hmm.
their view in the environment. I don't know, but we can talk about that
Yes,
later. But I,
definitely. Well, if
there,
you
oh,
have any
oh,
great suggestion, I'm all ears.
Sure. I'll follow up with you on that. But one thing before we go to rapid fire, I have to circle back and ask you because you were talking about your time as an executive coach and
Yes,
leadership skills and
yes.
things. What are just some of the Jenny Ming leadership must do's that help an executive exceed and excel?
Well, this is who I am. So I really try not to be someone else. So I think it's so important in leaders. It's not about me, it's about everybody else. Because I know that I actually don't do the doing, right? As the CEO, as the leader, everybody else is busy doing what they need to do. So I need to maybe connect the dots or remove obstacles or give them resources. So for me, my job actually is much, much more in the background. Of course, I have to set the vision, make sure that we're all aligned, making sure we're heading in the right direction. But it's really, if you ask most people, they would say, it really is not about me. I actually would be very happy to be in the background. And I think a leader also is about listening. I think I'm a very good listener. I don't do a ton of talking. I usually like to listen more than I talk because I love to learn new things. And I'm really a good learner. I'm a continuous learner. I think we would agree. I know less about retail today than I did 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the reason I could say that is because it's ever changing. And if I talk about all the things I did at Old Navy and apply it to Rothy, you were like, Jenny, are you crazy? Because it's not relevant already. So you have to have that growth mindset about learning new things and really be a good listener because there's lots of great ideas out there. You can't sit in your own office and think you're the one with the great ideas because actually it's usually not true. So those are my basic, I would say basic leadership philosophy. And I would say, last but not least, it's all about your team, the people you surround yourself with. And I think that's probably one of my biggest things. I always tell people I'm very fortunate. I always had great teams and they make me better and I learn from them. So if I hire somebody, this is one of my little course. If I interview you or walk around the store with you, if I didn't learn one thing from you, chances are I wouldn't hire you because I want to be able to learn from you. Right. So those are kind of basics for me.
Is there a favorite question you like to ask someone that you're interviewing?
I do, actually. I always ask them, what did you fail at? Because usually when you interview, people always tell you what they've done really well. And I always say, well, tell me the time you fail and what did you learn from it? And what did you do? Because I remember my failures is because actually, I think I learned more from my failure than my successes. Because your success, you're so excited and you're like, you moved on. Failure, you tend to ponder, like, why did I do that? I should have done this. So I usually ask that question. And if they say, well, I can't think of any. Well, how could you not?
Right.
Especially in our business, right? That means you haven't taken any risks. You've been doing the same thing over and over again, right? So anyway, so I would say that.
All right. Well, let's conclude by rapid fire. Are you ready? Favorite job?
It's always the job I'm at is because it is at present, but I could also tell you through my entire career, I actually have really enjoyed every job. And I'm not really trying to BS you because I'm one of those people that I really do love it. I mean, I wouldn't come out and work again if I didn't like to work.
Best mentor?
You mentioned both of them, it's Patty DeRosa and Mickey Drexler. I say this all the time, interviews or podcasts, whatever. If I've never met Mickey and never worked with him, I really would not be who I am today in my career or even personally. I learned so much from him, but I also learned a lot he has his course, but I really learned the basics of really having a point of view. Say it like it is. I could go on, be famous for some. You and I probably could write a book about it.
Words to live by.
Yes. So he probably would be, in fact, I tell people this. I said, he's been my boss, my mentor, my friend. So, and Patty too. She taught me how to build relationship with vendors. She's excellent in that.
Place you most like to vacation?
What?
Vacation when you're not working, you do those things, right? Come on.
There's so many, but there's two places kind of tie. One is I love Japan. So I'm a huge fan of Kyoto. I was just there last year. And one place I never get sick of, I would go back year after year, Paris.
Paris, I agree. And I love my time in Kyoto. I spent a lot of time there when I was doing Gap Japan. But walking through the bamboo forest, what is better than that?
Well, Japan is one of those, I'm always fascinated. It's just because of the culture. They could do one thing really well forever. And they do French food better than the French. They do.
They were doing Gap better than Gap.
Exactly.
It was amazing how well we ran an organization over there. Chris Garrick, who was running the stores, did an amazing job.
So it's still one of my most favorite country. But the city of Paris is such a, it's a walking city. And I'm just on awe every time. There's like, I could stop everywhere. I actually always set aside one day, even when I'm working, just to walk around and no plants, just to see where I wind up. So those are my two favorite cities.
Which designer has the most real estate in your closet?
It's not a designer, more a brand. So I would say the two, of course, is Levi's. It's because I've been on the board for 11 years. But you know what? That was not hard because I wear jeans 90% of my time. So when I was asked to, be on the board, I'm like, yes, no problem. So I probably have more Levi's in my closet than any. But a designer, well, This is still not a designer, it's more brand. I love Golden Goose, but not so much for the shoes, but for the ready to wear, which is a smaller part, but it's very intentional and deliberate. And it's casual, but really well done. So those two are like, I have a lot. But if you say designer, I always really love Miu Miu. It's a little young for me now, but I still have a lot that I kept through the years. It would be Miu Miu. And I'm so happy to see a resurgence right now. But yeah, it's a little young. And if I was 20, 30 years younger, maybe that could be great.
It's funny. My wife keeps everything that she's ever bought. So it's like you have to keep getting a bigger and bigger place, not for kids, but for stuff. But it'll come back. It'll be good.
Come back. I'm with her. I have a spare bedroom that I put all my old clothes because I swear it will come back.
I wish I had kept my 1969 jeans. They were so baggy and now they're back and I don't have them.
See, I told you, that's why actually I have stacks and stacks of denim from, my Gap days, Old Navy and Levi's, so I have plenty of denim, probably stacks.
Final question. Who would you most like to meet?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. There was a time I would have said Martha Stewart, not anymore, because I'm such a homemaker. But I would probably want to meet, some kind of chef. Actually, I'm more into food than I'm in clothing. So probably, one of the best chef there is probably like Julia's Child.
And with that, Jenny, we'll land this flight of the Retail Pilot. Thank you so much. It was amazing.
You're welcome. Stay in touch.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.